Okay, so this clinic is for the Festival Investment Scheme, round one. There are 2 rounds. And these are for festivals that take place in 2024, so next year. So the deadline is Thursday, the 1st of June at 5:30. And notification of results of the decisions of applications should be expected around September time. Okay, so I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but I'm going to cover the 4 areas for you: guidelines, the application form, how your application is processed and assessed, and then any sort of helpful tips. And those are the sections that I'm going to cover in the clinic. So in guidelines, I'll take you through the main aspects of the guidance, and then in the application form, I'll take you through the different sections, and then we'll cover processing and assessment and sort of some helpful tips with your application process. So the Festival Investment Scheme, for those of you that have applied before, the priorities of the scheme have not changed. So the reason for supporting festivals through this award is to provide financial support to small and mid-scale festivals to deliver high-quality arts and to support artists and audiences, artists to make the work and audiences to engage with the work. We also acknowledge, as part of this scheme, applications from different types of festival models, so different art forms, different scales, and also those models which are either an annual festival, biannual, or triennial festival models. So if you have, for example, been funded a couple of years ago and you're a biennial model, you can apply again. This is a scheme that supports funding on a one-off basis. So I'll just move on to the scheme structure. So in the Festival Investment Scheme, there are 3 different application bands. There's Band A, Band B, and Band C. So three different bands. And we ask you to select the band depending on the development of your organization. It's entirely up to you which band you choose, but each band has a certain amount of funding available. So we suggest that in Band A, it's most appropriate for small festivals or new festivals that want to test some new ideas, or festivals that are at the early stage of their development. And the funding available under that band is up to €10,000. Band B may be most suitable to small and mid-scale festivals that are seeking to sort of build program capacity. So you may want to sort of extend work in a particular program area, or you may wish to develop additional strategies for public engagement. So you may want to develop more programs for particular types of audiences, or you may want to work collaboratively with the public. And the funding available under that band is $10,000 to $25,000. There is one particular caveat to applying, which is in order to be eligible to apply under Band B, your organization must be established for a minimum of 3 years, and you must have executed 3 consecutive festival programs. And I'll come on a little bit later to what we mean by consecutive. But in Band A, there are no restrictions. And then in Band B, you must have operated for a minimum of 3 years. Band C is for festival organizations that want to develop strategic capacity. So strategically led festival organizations that are seeking to develop art form projects or develop their art form areas. And again, the minimum requirement is 5 years in terms of consecutive festivals and the organization being established. You can only make 1 application under festival investment in any year. So you have to choose one of these bands when applying. Okay, so just to talk a little bit more about choosing the correct band. So we would say to you that if you are a new applicant to the scheme, or you're a festival organization attending to apply to Band B or Band C for the first time, or you have been previously supported in Band B but wish to apply into Band C, we would encourage you to have a conversation with us. We don't direct you as part of that conversation, but we talk to you about your festival model so that you can make an informed choice about the band that you would like to apply to. For new applicants to the scheme, we like to have an understanding of your festival model before you apply. So we always advise you to have those conversations, and I'll give you some contact details at the end so you can contact the festival team. Just in relation to, we get lots of questions about band transfers. So can you transfer between one band and the other? So as a general rule, you cannot be transferred into higher bands. So if you apply under A, you won't be transferred into B, but you can actually transfer into lower bands if you don't provide sufficient information, or if the funding requested is lower than the amount available in that band. So for example, if you applied into Band B and you only needed €5,000 worth of support, we would transfer you into Band A, because that sort of matches the band of investment. Okay, so every now and again, I'm going to sort of highlight some FAQs for you, which might be helpful, frequently asked questions. And then anything you see in pink text is normally there to highlight sort of particular important issues for you. So a frequently asked question we get here is, we're an organization that operates 2 festivals, one in April and one in October. So should we apply into separate rounds? Should we apply into round 1 for the April festival and round 2 for the October one? So the answer to that is no. You can only make one application into festival investment per year. So you should apply for both festivals in the round most suitable for your earliest festival program. So in this case, the earliest festival is April, and therefore you should apply into round 1 for both of those festival programs. Okay, so the objectives of this scheme are to ensure that there's a diverse and varied arts ecology across the country, and to support small to mid-scale festival programs to deliver high quality and engaging arts festival activity programs for audiences, and contribute to the development of artist practices, and also to increase opportunities for public engagement. So when we are, the purpose of the award is to support particular objectives, and those objectives are demonstration of artistic excellence, to show evidence of the art form priorities, which we'll come to in a moment, and to demonstrate sound and effective management, which we call feasibility. You'll notice these because these are the 3 criteria area under which we assess the application. So we do have particular priorities in relation to this scheme. So when your application comes in, we look to see if the application demonstrates these priorities. And there are 3 areas. One is in public engagement, which is evidence of audience development strategies, and how your organization supports the public to attend arts events or participate in arts events. Festival priorities, which is about how your festival is integrated with your local community and local partners, and how you have an understanding of the context of your place. So how your festival program demonstrates placemaking and is relevant and of value to the local community. And also how you support as a festival local artists living in your region. So are there particular initiatives you do to support their development? And finally, equality, diversity and inclusion, which is a corporate policy priority within the Arts Council. And here we want to understand better how your festival supports diversity and inclusion and how it's embedded into your working practices. So that could be around how you select artists, how you try and diversify audiences, for example. So I just might cover the application process for you. So the qualifying dates for your festival to apply in round 1 are that your festival must operate between the 1st of January 2024 and the 30th of June 2024. If you fall outside of those dates, this is not the round that you should apply into. If you have any questions, do let us know. There is no qualifying restrictions to applying into Band A. In Band B, as we've established, it's a minimum of 3 years for consecutive festival programs and your organization in terms of how long they've been established. And then for Band C, it's 5 years. And again, just reiterating here that you can only make one application to festival investment per year. So you have to choose one of those bands. We often get a lot of questions about linked events, which is generally sort of quarterly or regularly sort of a series of artistic events that might happen through the calendar. So that could be a literature series, one every month for 12 months. These are kind of low priority in relation to this scheme. This isn't the right scheme for that type of application. This is for festival programs where the concentrated event happens in a particular set period of time. So it's the coalescing of all those events into one program. So one of the frequently asked questions we get is about sort of consecutive programming, what we mean by that. So in this particular example, this festival operated programs between 2016 and 2019, and they weren't able to produce a program in 2021. And the question is, can we still qualify? So the answer is yes, as long as you've operated 3 consecutive programs at some stage in your operational history, that's okay. There's not an issue about that. So who cannot apply into the scheme? So first of all, individuals. So this is for organizations only, this scheme. So if you're an individual applicant for a festival, you would need to establish an organization to be able to apply. This list is in the guidelines, so I'm going to highlight the most relevant. So if your organization is currently in receipt of strategic funding, partnership funding, or Arts Centre funding from the Arts Council, you cannot apply into festival investment. There is a restriction on those applicants. If you have applied for a festival through Arts Grant Funding 2024, so the application for Arts Grant Funding closed last week, and you have applied to undertake a festival program, you cannot apply into festival investment. And just to highlight, this is slightly different to eligibility that we've had in the scheme before. So it doesn't matter if you have applied into Arts Grant Funding for a different type of festival. If you've applied for any type of festival in your Arts Grant Funding application for 2024, you cannot apply into festival investment. So if you want to clarify that with us at some stage, if that applies to you, then please do. If you're a member of the Council of National Cultural Institutions, or you are directly funded by the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaeltacht, Sports and Media for any type of festival program, you cannot apply into festival investment. This includes the small-scale local festivals and summer schools scheme that the department runs. So again, if you need to clarify that with us, we're very happy to do that with you. And of course, if your festival falls outside the qualifying dates for this round, you shouldn't apply. So a frequently asked question, we're an arts centre which operates an annual festival and we receive Arts Centre funding. Can we apply into the festival investment scheme? Again, as above, point 6, no. If you're an organisation in receipt of Arts Centre funding from the Arts Council, you cannot apply. Okay, so I think we covered this earlier, but just to reiterate, there are maximum amounts that you can apply for in each band. So in Band A, up to 10,000, Band B is up to 25,000, and Band C is up to 45,000. So this is how much you can apply for. You'll see there's an asterisk there after each amount. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm happy to take questions at the end, and this is in the applicant guidance for you. But you are not allowed to exceed that request. The only time that you can actually do this is in relation to what we call access costs, disability access costs. So you can apply over the threshold. So if you're applying into Band B, you could apply over 25,000. but only for access costs. And you must outline what those access costs are with your application. So again, if that relates to your festival, it's always good to contact the festival's team, and we can take you through the guidance and tell you what you need to provide. But that's the only instance in which you can exceed that particular request. And then underneath those boxes is a list of what you can expect to apply for in relation to the scheme. So it's anything that supports the development and execution and presentation of your festival activity. So though there's a list there, it's not exhaustive, but it's sort of there as a guide to help you. So artist fees, venue rental, you can put some staffing costs and administrative costs in your budget as well in your request. And we did mention this, I think, in the last clinic, but no harm to mention again that a contribution to festival program archiving can be part of your request. I would stress the word contribution, and it's an opportunity for your festival to record, put some money towards recording its legacy if you are considering archiving your work with one of the national archives. So again, just a note there that you can only make one application in any year to one of those bands. Okay, so how much can you apply for? So we've covered the maximum limit across each band. So we'll cover this in a little bit more detail, but in each band, what you are requesting is the difference between your expenditure and your income. So when you put your budget together for your application, your request will be your proposed expenditure minus your proposed income. So to give you an example there, which is if you're applying under Band B, the figure that you should have as a request to the Arts Council should be no lower than €10,001 and no higher than 25,000, because that is the breadth of funding available within that band. So if you're seeking to apply for something lower than 10,000, you would make an application into Band A. And if you're seeking to apply for something over 25,000, and that's your request to the Arts Council, it would be in Band C. So your proposed expenditure should include all your eligible costs that are relevant to your application. So we've covered those areas of what you might apply for. And your proposed income should include what you expect to receive from other funders or your box office or program sales or sponsorship, for example. We also ask you to reflect your benefit in kind or in-kind income and expenditure. So those are, that can be volunteering, it can be labor, it can be venue costs. Anything that's provided to you in free should be registered as an income line in kind, and also it should equal as a figure in the expenditure line as well. I'll come to that a little bit later for you. Okay, so what can you not apply for in the scheme? So activities that are not arts related. So events relating to heritage or craft, or those that are primarily commercial, like food fairs or sporting events. So if it's non-arts related, it's not an eligible cost. Training programs are not supported under the scheme, and activities that have already taken place or will have commenced before a decision is made on your application. So decisions are announced in September, so you need to bear that in mind when you're putting in information around your timeline in the application form. But if you are doing any preparation and planning or doing any research for your festival program, we don't take that into consideration. That's not your activity. What we're talking about is your events, your festival program shouldn't have commenced before September of 2023. So any activities for charity fundraising purposes won't be supported by the Arts Council, any academic conferences or symposia, any events that you propose to take place outside of the Republic of Ireland, and any capital costs or competitive events. So some of the questions we get are from festivals that sometimes aren't arts festivals wanting to apply into the scheme. So we're a food festival and we've developed a small arts program. Can we apply? So the answer to that is you can only apply for the arts related costs. So if you're a food festival, it doesn't stop you from applying to us, for example, but we would only support, if we were going to support your application, we would only support the arts related costs. Okay, so this is the most significant change to those of you that have applied into the scheme before, which is what we call mandatory support materials. So this is information that that you must supply with your application. So what we mean by supporting material is materials such as documents which are separate from and additional to your application form. And in order to be considered eligible for assessment, so in order to allow us to assess your application, you must submit mandatory supporting materials, and they must be provided online. We do not accept anything by email or by post. So the type of supporting materials that are required in addition to your application form will depend on the nature of your application and the funding band under which you're applying. There is a table in the guidance called Table 1, and you should refer to that. And actually, that's the table that's on the slide right now. And there's also a section in the application form called Section 7, which is a checkbox. It's a checklist, and that also sort of outlines what is mandatory. So I might go through this very quickly with you. So if you're applying under Band A, there is no requirement to supply mandatory support material unless you are proposing a new festival. So if you're a new applicant to the scheme applying under Band A, you must provide us with CVs of the people organising the festival programme. So that's the only time. If you're a regular applicant into Band A, there's no requirement to provide any mandatory support material. You can provide optional material. It's entirely up to you. So you can provide letters of agreement and you can provide a draft program if you want to for 2024, but there's no obligation to provide any mandatory supports. In Band B, there is only one mandatory support requirement, which is letters of support. We ask you to provide up to a maximum of 3 letters. So you can provide 1, or you can provide 2 or 3, but a maximum of 3. So we would expect to see with a Band B application, letters of support in addition to your application form. And then in Band C, we ask for a minimum of 5 letters of support. So you have to have a minimum of 5 letters of support or agreements or memorandums of understanding. And we also ask for a festival development plan, which is obligatory for that band. One of the things I would just mention is if you're a Band C applicant, you must provide 1 of your letters of support from your local authority. And I'll go over what's acceptable in relation to that as well, but one of those must be from your local authority county area. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll sort of go through those 3 different categories for you very quickly. So the first one is in relation to new festivals. So if you are applying into Band A as a new festival, we expect to see CVs of those that are going to be managing your festival. So this helps us to gain a better understanding of how your festival is managed, because there isn't any track record of that festival to date. So we look at the track record of the individuals proposing the festival program. So the CVs should accompany your application. And in those CVs, you should highlight for those assessing your application any relevant experience you have of managing, curating, or producing festival or event type programs. You should place all of your CVs, if you can, into one document like a PDF. It's very helpful. And there is a guide in the application guidance called Table 2, which gives you this information. So it supports you in preparing these materials. Okay, so letters of agreement and letters of agreement which are in support for your proposed activities. So you'll see sort of in the right-hand side of the screen, there are two little boxes sitting underneath the title which say Band B and Band C. So in these slides, they sort of tell you which bands they are relevant for. So this is only relevant to those applicants in Band B and Band C. So we often get questions about what is a letter of support. And so we have provided a bit of additional guidance here. So we consider a letter of support, it's a written statement, and it can be made by an individual. So it could be made by an artist, or it could be made by an organization, such as your local authority or a business sponsor or a community or club or a school, in support of your proposed festival program. And the emphasis is on proposed. So it's not a reference on what you've done in the past. It's about how this particular partner will support you to deliver this festival program. So it's about your proposed 2024 program. You can provide it as a letter, it can be an email, it can be what we call a memorandum of understanding, which is an informal agreement, and it should be to address to your festival. One of the things to highlight here is you should not write your own letter of support. So it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be from your festival about your festival. It should be from a third party that you're intending to work with or partner with. So the number of letters required in each funding band is outlined in Table 1, which is what we've just reviewed. And we will not accept documentation that relates to a previous festival. So again, it's for proposed festival program in 24. And just as some advisory support, we would suggest that you might consider having a variety of stakeholders reflected in your letters of support as well. And if you can place them in one document, that's always very helpful. If you are a Band C applicant, as I mentioned before, one letter of support should be from your local authority in order for you to be eligible to be considered under a Band C. So just to highlight this, because sometimes this is a little bit confusing and we haven't perhaps been clear about this in the past, which is this letter of support can be from any department within the local authority. It doesn't have to be from the arts department, but the letter should outline why the local authority endorses or supports the work of your festival. So it could be from the arts team within the local authority. It could be from the economic development department within the local authority, outlining why they support your festival program. If the local authority is able to provide you with in-kind support or financial support, they should outline it in the letter, and they should outline what the value of that support is. But it is not a prerequisite. You don't need to have financial information included in the letter of support from the local authority. It's just for us to understand what your relationship is with the local authority and how they can support your festival moving forward. So it doesn't always have to be financial. It could be something that they provide you with support in other ways, or it could be that they endorse the work or they support the work. So it's just to give us a better idea of your relationship with the local authority area. So the other mandatory support material for Band C applicants is the strategic plan, business plan, festival development plan. You must provide it with your application, so it's a separate document. And it's effectively a plan over a longer period of time. So this allows people assessing your application to understand what your strategic goals are as a festival organization. It's a series of operational actions over a longer period of time. It's a roadmap of what your organization seeks to do, and it should be reviewed and updated on a regular basis. So it should outline how your festival will develop and be managed, the resources that you have in place that are required to underpin the successful delivery of the plan and your program. It should complement the proposal that's in your application form. So you should be able to look at those two documents together if someone is assessing your application, and they should be able to speak to each other. if you're thinking of applying into Band C, and you're looking at, and you don't have a festival development plan, the Arts Council does provide you with a template, and it's available when you are looking for the application guidance on the available funding page. So you can fill that in, and that provides you with an opportunity to go through that planning process, and you must upload it as a separate document. We do often get questions about organizations that have existing plans. So you might have a plan that runs, I don't know, from 2020 to 2025, and you're right in the middle of that plan right now. We often get questions about whether you can update that plan. You certainly can. So if you want to provide us with that plan, you can also provide us with a note to say, you know, over the last couple of years, we've reviewed certain elements of this plan, and we have subsequently updated it, and just provide us with a note on that, which is very helpful. I won't go into detail on it now. There are other instances where you are required to put mandatory support materials in with your application. However, it's to do with the particular circumstances of your festival program. So if you're working with vulnerable adults, for example, or if you're working with animals, you may need to provide separate information. So this is what we call mandatory in certain circumstances. So I've referred to it on the slides, but it's in much more detail in the applicant guidance. So I would refer you to that if there are particular instances where you have specialized delivery in your festival program. So this slide is really to cover eligibility in relation to your application. So in order for your application to be actually assessed by the Arts Council, it must go through a number of eligibility checks. So you must ensure that this checklist of 7 points is covered when you put your application in. So this is outlined in the guidance that if you miss the application deadline, or you do not submit your materials through the online system, or you fail to complete any section of the application form, or you cannot apply as outlined in sections 1.3 to 1.5 of the guidance, or you apply for an activity that you cannot apply for as listed in the guidance, or you fail to provide the mandatory supporting materials, or your application is better suited to another program, it will be deemed ineligible, and it will not be assessed. So I would always say, if you have questions about that as you're going through the application process, you can always talk to us about that. You can always ask for clarification through the team. Okay, so I'm just going to take you through the highlights of the application form. I'm not going to go into detail on all of the sections. It will look familiar if you've applied before. There are a couple of key changes that I just wanted to highlight to you. So the first section you will see is a general section. We give you some guidance, which is right at the start of the form. And the guidance is about timing, how long it will take you roughly to fill out each section. And there's a little bit of information there about how you might approach your application, and also the kind of information you would need to hand as you're filling it out. What I would say to you is that if you are thinking of applying on the deadline day of the application, which is the 1st of June, you will notice that the timing that is required to fill out this form is probably in the region of over 8 hours. So if you start on the morning of the 1st of June, it is unlikely that you will finish your application before the deadline. So we just like to flag that with everybody. Obviously, if you can get your application in earlier, it's easier for you. But we advise that you aim to get it in at least 24 to 48 hours before the deadline, just in case you encounter any technical problems along the way. Okay, so in the general section, it's really about providing us with information about your application. So what I would draw your attention to is section 1.5, this is where you now have to select a box to tell us which application band you're applying into. Please do not forget to select this. In the last iteration of the scheme, a number of people left this blank. So it's very important that you select this. We have moved away from 3 different types of application form. So everyone that applies into the scheme applies into the same, but has the same application form, but where you identify the band that you're applying under is here in the application form as well as online. So make sure that you select that. And also make sure that if your application, if your festival program has a number of different art form areas in it, you may want to tick the boxes in 1.6 of the application form just to let us know so that we can potentially ask for other assessments from other art form teams in consideration of your application. So I think this this section is completely new. So if you've applied to the scheme before, this will be new to you. So in previous iterations of the Festival Investment Scheme, we have asked you to provide a PDF or a written document, which is proof of your previous program. So we have decided not to make that an eligibility criteria for the scheme moving forward, but we would still like to see proof of your program, but we've tried to make it a little bit easier for applicants. So in this section, we ask you to tell us when your festival was formed and how many festivals have taken place. And then we ask you to provide us with proof of your recent program, and we will accept website page URL links. So if you have your festival program published on your website, you can provide us with the festival link to that so that our assessors can look at your program. So what I would advise you to do when you get to this section, strongly advise you to do this, is to look at the guidance which is underneath this question, because this tells you what is acceptable and what isn't. So we will accept links to web pages and streaming platforms, so you can provide us with videos, but we will not accept any links to Google Drive or a Twitter or Facebook or social media. So if it is the case that you do not have a website as a festival, you may want to provide us with a written document, and you can upload that with your application. Now, having said that, there is no eligibility restrictions on this. So if you don't provide a web link or you don't provide the documentation, that's fine. But what you need to know is that it may affect your assessment score, because the reason why we ask for this information is to assess your track record. So it's just one of the things to be aware of when you're filling out the application. So what I would ask you to do is to look over this, and if you have any questions, then do come back to our team because it's a new section in the application. Okay, so these two will be familiar to you. So 2.3 is tell us about your organization. It's a very important section because, again, it's about understanding the track record of the organization, what you've done and what you intend to do. So it's very important that you fill that out and provide us very succinctly with information about what you've achieved. And then 2.4 is listing who is involved in your project, which is standard, and you would have filled that out before. So section 3 is about your proposal. So we ask you for the title and dates and location of your festival. We ask you for a summary, so just 3 short bullet points telling us what you want to achieve. And then we ask for much more detail, and that's 3.3. It's called details of your proposal. And just to highlight here that in 3.3, this is where we look at your artistic merit and the art form priorities, which are the criteria areas for assessment. So what you have here is in the application form are some prompts. They're highlighted for you in pink. But those prompts are there to support you in terms of providing information. So you should consider telling us about the rationale and vision for your festival, why you do it, and what you want to achieve. Those are called proposed outcomes. What your artistic ambition is and what your festival supports are in relation to artists and how you want to develop artists' artistic ambitions. And then how your festival meets with the art form priorities. So depending on the art form area you select as an applicant, there are particular priorities which you must align to. So I will cover those with you in a minute. Okay, so Section 4 is about the priorities of the award. So we talked about this earlier. So one of the things to consider is how your festival proposal demonstrates public engagement, demonstrates the festival priorities, and demonstrates equality, diversity, and inclusion. So you will see on the right-hand side of the screen is the application form. And in the pink box is prompts, again, which will support you to and will guide you to look at those areas and see how they might be included in your response in the application form. So Section 5 is financial management. So this should all look familiar to you if you filled out the application before. However, there is a key change here that I'm just going to highlight with you. So previously in the Festival Investment Scheme, if you had applied into the higher bands, which is Band B and Band C, we would have asked you for a separate document called a financial breakdown. We're not asking for that anymore because we have placed that now in the application form. So this is your only chance to give us as much information as possible about your budget. So we've provided an example for you here on the slides. So this is the expenditure, section 1, 5.1. This is the expenditure items for your festival project. So as you can see there, it covers artistic costs, production, technical, marketing, accommodation, administration, and financial costs. And here, this particular applicant has outlined, let's just take the first line, the artist fees being 2,500. But the applicant has also outlined how those costs were calculated. So it provides your assessors with as much information about how you have come, how you've arrived at those costs for your particular program. So if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you will also see that there's a section right at the bottom called in-kind expenditure. So this is, these are services that are offered for free. So in this particular instance, it's the value of volunteering and some in-kind venue support. And that's been totaled and it's been added to the final total expenditure, which is highlighted in pink at the bottom. When you move to section 5.2 of the application form, it's a very similar format, except it's for your income streams. So again, in this particular instance, the applicant has outlined where the income is intended to come from. So box office 45,000, local authority grants 8,000. And each one of those is identified as either pending, which is what you expect to receive, or confirmed if you have at that stage received any confirmation of funding support, or you have any funds that are already secured. And again, you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, in-kind income, and that figure matches the in-kind expenditure. So they must match, they must balance because it's the same value. And then you have the total income there, which is 80,800. So when it comes to your request for funding from the Arts Council, what you're requesting is the shortfall. So it's the difference between your income and your expenditure. So you can see here that the expenditure for that applicant is 117,000. The total income projected is 80,800. And so therefore in 5.3, which is my request to the Arts Council, it's the shortfall. It's the difference between the two, which is just over 36,000. And as mentioned before, you can see in the two highlighted boxes there, the in-kind income and the in-kind expenditure balance, which they should. So make sure that you consider that when you're putting your application in. The other thing as well, just the pink note at the bottom, is the amount you're requesting must be within the upper and lower limits of the band. So this applicant is a band C applicant, can apply for between 25,000 and 45,000, and the request here is 36. So that is appropriate for the band that they're applying for. Okay, so section 6 and section 7, these are the final parts of the application form. Section 6 will ask you about project management. So this is, these sections are quite brief, but it's your opportunity to tell us about how your organization is managed, how you'll deliver your festival, who is in charge of particular aspects of the festival program, how it's run, and the activity plan is to give us an indication of the what we would call milestone dates. So, you know, when your program might go to print, when your tickets might go on sale, when you start your advertising, all of those kind of things, when you might book your artists. Just again, be aware that your activity plan you should make sure that any activity which is festival activity doesn't preempt any funding decisions, so anything prior to September 2023. And then what we have here is just a checklist in section 7, which is about your mandatory supporting material. So in this particular instance, this is the band C applicant, and they look down the checklist and they see that there are particular things they need to provide as mandatory. So mandatory support letters have been organized by the applicant and then uploaded with the application, and then obviously the business plan as well. And then once that's done, you can provide that with your application and submit it online. So that checklist is to really help you. It's just sort of sense check that you have everything in place. So when your application comes into the Arts Council, we follow, in all cases, we follow this assessment process. It's published in the guidance for you, and it outlines the stages that we go through when we're looking at all applications in the Festival Investment Scheme. So when you submit your application, you will receive 2 emails. The first will be sent immediately to acknowledge the application, and the second one will arrive a few minutes later with your application number. If you do not receive that confirmation, you need to contact the online services email, which is listed there, because that's very important. You can't proceed without that information. Your application is then subsequently checked for eligibility. So again, those areas that we covered earlier about what you need to provide with your application, that's what we will check for, and we will check for what you've applied for and can you apply for those costs, etc. In some cases, we may ask you to move your application into a different assessment team if we believe that your application sits more appropriately into a particular art form area that you hadn't considered. But we will ask you to do that. We will not move it without your permission. So if that happens, we will write to you. We will put that in writing. Once your application is in the correct assessment team, an advisor or a member of staff will make a written assessment on the application, and it's then scored by the staff within the Arts Council, so within the team under which you applied. Applications which score 60% and above are shortlisted for funding consideration, and those scoring under 60% are not considered. And one of the things I just want to highlight here is if your application scores over 60%, even though it's considered for funding, it doesn't guarantee a funding offer because it depends on the budgetary context that the Arts Council is operating in. So it's always good to flag that with you. Once the executive reviews all the shortlisted applications and makes recommendations, it then makes funding decisions based on the scores of the applications. So funding decisions are made in applicant score order until the available budget is allocated. And then the funding decisions are communicated to everyone at the same time in writing, and funding decisions are noted by council. You should expect to hear from us in September, and you can request written feedback. I think recently we have given that to you automatically, but if you don't receive it, certainly come back to us and ask for your written assessment. Irrespective of the funding decision, we always encourage you to read it, because it's helpful whether you've been funded or not. So when we look at your application, when we're assessing it, we measure your application against 3 criteria area: artistic merit and art form priorities. So we look at the quality of the proposal, we look at your track record, and we look at the development around the art form or the arts practice that your festival operates in. The priorities of the award is what we covered earlier, which is equality and diversity, festival objectives, and public engagement. And then feasibility, which is about how the actual festival is managed, the budget. We look at the track record of the team and the extent to which your festival demonstrates equitable conditions for paying artists. And a little earlier, I mentioned art form priorities. So you can see in the top right-hand corner, there's a box there in pink. So if you go to the application form, you'll see that if you apply under a particular area, there are particular art form priorities. So you can see there under Circus, Street Arts and Spectacle, if I'm applying as a Circus, Street Arts and Spectacle applicant, I would want to have a look at those art form priorities to make sure that my application or my festival proposal aligned with some of those priority areas that are listed. So how do scores relate to funding offers? So as I mentioned before, they play a significant part. We score each application using a scoring matrix, which is on the right-hand side of the screen. That's also in your guidance. So the scores should relate to the assessment narrative that you receive in your written assessment. Those scoring 60 and above will be shortlisted and considered for funding, and the funding amounts will reflect the budgetary context in which the Arts Council is operating for the scheme. You should also know that each one of those criteria areas is weighted slightly differently, and the weighting is down there below for you. So we give priority to the priorities of the award with 45% of the marks. Artistic merit is 35% and feasibility is 20%. So finally, helpful tips. Hopefully this will assist you in making your application. So pay attention to the language in the applicant guidance. If we say must or should, it's a direction, so it's not optional. So if we say you must include these materials with your application, you absolutely should, because it will have a bearing on the eligibility of the application when it is assessed by the Arts Council and when we're looking at it. Have your guidelines to hand when you're filling out your application form. If there's any aspect of the form that's confusing and you don't understand it, please contact us. We want you to make the best application possible. So if you don't feel that you can't approach us, you certainly can. If you approach us on the day of the deadline, we may have some difficulty in communicating with you because it would be very busy. So any questions, better to get them into us sooner rather than later. Pay attention to the notes and prompts in the application. They're there to assist you in filling out the form. Make sure that when you put in your income and expenditure, you're going to be asked at 2 stages in the application process to do this. The first is when you put the application information in online on the online system, and the second is in your application form. So you want to make sure that those amounts tally, that they're exactly the same. So just to sense check that. Double check that you've applied for the amounts allowable in the band you're applying for. Make sure that your funding request from the Arts Council is your expenditure minus your income. Do not leave any aspect of the application form blank, because that renders the application ineligible. So any section not relevant, put not applicable or tell us why. And then double check that your mandatory support material is included with your application. Now, I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but we will share these slides with you, and they'll be available on our website. But we have a number of frequently asked questions around eligibility, around supporting materials, and around the award. And these are all included for you in these slides. So if you have any additional FAQs, we can add them today and then provide these slides for you. But they're just, it's just a way of being able to help you address some concerns you might have that might have already been answered before. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing now.